So a little bit of context. I'll just take a minute to introduce Victory Square, and then we'll get right to the panel session. So Victory Square Technologies, as I mentioned, is an emerging technology accelerator. What does that mean? It means that our CEO, Shafin Diamond-Tijani, has been building technology companies for over 20 years. Shafin's currently in a meeting at the moment. I just want to step up. And for context purposes, what that means is that Victory Square has been identifying market opportunities for 20 years. Shafin and his team were first into internet, they were first into mobile, they were first into games. We've got a battle-tested set of playbooks, if you will, in terms of experience, know-how, and expertise, and access. And what Victory Square was built for to give investors an opportunity to gain access to early-stage tech companies that are well-curated, that are able to leverage Victory Square's management team and Shafin's know-how, experience, and access. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a second or two. We're going to get to know our panelists a little bit better, and from that, during our conversation, we're going to kind of show you and demonstrate what happens with Victory Square and in our portfolio companies, and why you may take an interest in that. So out of the gate, I'm just going to turn to the panel, and I'm just going to start out and ask them for 2 minutes to just introduce themselves and their company. Ted, would you mind going first, please?
Thanks, Peter. So my name is Ted. It's a pleasure to be here. I represent the esports and gaming space. So I grew up in Vancouver. After I finished my undergrad degree, decided to venture out into Hong Kong and China, and that's where I got started with my gaming career. And just being in China, and I remember I first arrived there in 2008, you see the massive growth in the market, not just in the gaming space, but in tech in general. But I was very lucky to get into the gaming space, and I had the opportunity to work with Zynga China while I was in Beijing. So 2015, I went back to Vancouver. I headed up a business development with a gaming studio. And I've always kind of wanted to look at the up and coming trends in gaming. And so in 2015 was when I really saw the growth in esports. So I ran a company, started a company that was producing esports content. I was actually here in Toronto about 2.5 years ago, actually in this very convention center, running the first Canadian mobile esports tournament here during the Fan Expo. So I've been following esports very closely for the past 2 years. From my first startup, concentrating on esports content, I pivoted towards esports tech. So currently, my company, Peak Games, is producing a esports platform, specifically working with esports venues and event organizers.
Thanks very much, Ted. Really appreciate that. And if you don't mind, Sohail, could you answer that question as well, please? Could you tell us about yourself and give us a little context on AgTech as well?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Peter. So my name is Sohail Samimi. I've been a serial entrepreneur investor for a number of years now in the cannabis and hemp industry, focused primarily on hemp and hemp-derived products. Also the founder and director for AgTech Scientific, which is a company focused on ensuring industrial size grow and extraction and supply of phytocannabinoids for the marketplace. So this entails now being able to grow millions of plants, be able to extract at high volume, and then from there on be able to make finished goods again on mass scale. Many markets internationally are opening up with regulations now enabling those products to not only go into the more restrictive cannabis channels, but really into mass retail in general. In December 2018, the Farm Bill Act passed in the United States, so it's really a new era that's in front of us as far as phytocannabinoids and THC-free products are concerned. So our focus is on ensuring large-scale production and availability of goods derived from hemp.
Sohail, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Vahid, a slightly different question for you. You're a growth officer with Victory Square. Could you give us a little bit of context in terms of what that role entails and how Victory Square brings its value prop to portfolio companies to drive value?
Absolutely. So before I answer that question, I'd like to review the Victory Square process for the portfolio companies.
And as a courtesy, take a minute and introduce yourself as well, please.
Absolutely. So my name is Vahid. My background is engineering and business from Simon Fraser University. Had multiple businesses in early 20s. From late 20s, started working with mostly SaaS companies and payment processing companies in US and Canada. Had in charge of their marketing, sales, and revenue. Had experience anywhere between like 5-fold to 10-fold growth in most of those companies. That we've gone through different markets. or introduce them different services or different products to have a value add-on. What I usually do with the businesses is the fact that I try to have a scalable, process-oriented businesses that the cost per customer is going to go down when they go through the scale. So that has been my background, mostly in tech. I joined Victory Square last year in the month of June, and been working with the portfolio company on their growth sides. To answer to your question, give you a background on the Victory Square process, we're pretty hands-on with our portfolio companies. That's one of the biggest differences between us and most of the similar businesses out there. We provide support from growth, legal, operations, financial advising, and all that. So what I try to do with the portfolio company is the fact that we try to set the goals based on the market standards, based on the market capacity, and reverse engineering that to figure out what needs to be done on daily basis and weekly basis, and keep track of that. If they're on green, they're doing the right job, and we don't need to get involved. If they're in red, that's the time that we need to get involved and figure out what the problem is, and take them through that process and take them that stage. Now, the second part of it is to make sure what they are working on is scalable, because many of the businesses, when they get to a specific stage, the cost is going to go so high that they won't be able to maintain it. In the early stages of the business, that's where we can add the most value by having a scalable business and set up the proper processes. They go through that.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated, Vahid. Barinder, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Would you take a minute, please, to introduce yourself and tell us about GrowTech Labs?
My name is Barinder Rasodi, and I come to GrowTech Labs from a different perspective. Most of my career has been spent on the policy and regulatory side, either being an elected municipal councillor or on the board of one of the largest health authorities in the country. One of the things that I think is really important for us moving forward is for business to have certainty. In the cannabis space right now, it's very difficult to have certainty as we're implementing new regulations and the biggest policy shift our country will ever see. In partnership with Victory Square Technologies and Sohails, what we've done is developed GrowTech Labs, and we're working to provide that certainty for not only the cannabis industry, but also for investors by creating a program that's going to accelerate companies that deal with pain points for the cannabis industry. One of the first companies under GrowTech Labs is Elevated Signals. And how we're going to build on that certainty is to make sure that as we identify the pain points, we are nurturing and growing companies to be able to address those. As you may know, one of the biggest pain points for industry so far has been the shortage of supply and the question around the quality of supply. GrowTech Labs introduced yesterday the first ever BC Cannabis Co-op in partnership with the BC Co-op Association. We've developed and exited out of a company called Cannabis Wise, which was a quality assurance program similar to VQA, because we know for new consumers that the issues of quality are top of mind. And as we move forward with our next cohort, please follow us at growtechlabs.com. We are encouraging companies to apply for our cohort that will start in September. And we are also looking to fund companies that may not need to be accelerated. We're being very mindful of being fluid and not using too much of a cookie cutter approach, because in such a new industry, we think that would be short-sighted. So we're really paying attention to the companies who are applying. And even if they don't become a part of our program, we're making sure that in our collaborative approach, they are being directed to others who could help them. Thank you.
Barinder, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. So the next question is a little more diverse. Ted, I'll just go back to you if that's all right. So in your case, could you give us a real insight as to what was the catalyst for kicking off Peak, and what is the core IP that's going to ensure that this company is going to thrive?
Thanks, Peter. I think we already had a lot of talks about esports, and so I approach esports with a bit of a different perspective. So I've been a gamer all my life, and as I mentioned earlier, I got lucky that somehow I fell into gaming as a career. And same thing with esports. Esports was something that didn't exist when I was in university, or even when I finished my MBA coming out of school. In a sense, it did. There were many competitions, so I'm sure amongst the gamers in us, we heard of games such as Counter-Strike and Street Fighter. They're competitive games, but esports as a whole has only taken off in the past years. So I think the easy approach to understand esports is, okay, well, it's sports and we put an E in front. So let's look at the growth of the NBA and NFL and just try to copy that model, and in terms of building the fan base, building the team, building the stadium and whatnot. But what I found was when I first approached esports and wanted to build a startup in esports, is that the consumption behavior is very different. So one of my first hires actually was the founder of the UBC Esports Association. So I asked her to take me out to your events. I want to see how people interact with the esports content. How are they engaging with the game? How are they engaging with the live events? How are they engaging with the streams? And what I found was that it's something that I couldn't get immediately. And so what I found was that there's no easy way to understand esports unless you get yourself into esports. And so that took me a few years, and this is a big reason why I pivoted my business from what I assumed initially as there could be a mobile esports that could really take off, to understanding that, maybe North America is not quite ready for a strictly mobile esports yet, and rather looking at the ecosystem, looking at the fact that the venues still have a lot of room to grow. Events, even though the mega events are attracting tens of thousands of people to attend, what about the rest of the ecosystem? What about amateur events, your meet and greets, regional tournaments? I think there's still a lot to be explored within esports, and so I always look at an approach from a consumer's perspective. What are they looking for? What's lacking? Whether it's technology, whether it's physical venues, and try to approach that problem with a solution.
It's a great answer, man. Thank you so much. So, Barinder, I have a question for you. You have a very different thesis than most conventional startups and early stage tech companies. In your case, you're investing and identifying very select organizations. Could you tell us a little more about the criteria that you go through, how you identify what value add you offer, and how you have gone through kind of getting your business off the ground, and what the next steps might look like with this first cohort?
So I came into the cannabis space founding a nonprofit called the National Institute of Cannabis Health and Education. And as I traveled across the country consulting and looking at how legalization was being implemented in different provinces, as we know, each province has set out their own regulations and guidelines. One of the things that came quite apparent is that there is a very strong economy, pre-legalization economy in the cannabis space. A lot of these people have invested their entire lives into not only producing very solid supply, but very high quality supply. But one of the things that was missing is because they operated in a pre-legalization, unregulated world, was how to become a part of a legalized, over-regulated new industry. And so what we are doing is we are collaborating and working on creating success for the pre-legalization community in the areas of production, testing, distribution, marketing, branding, and sales. But we're also working with the licensed producer community because they are also now strapped with some very strict marketing and branding restrictions. So them getting their message out has become quite a bit of a challenge. So we're acting as a group that brings people together to ensure success. And the companies that we are looking at are the ones who are committed to making the transition into the legal space, who are looking at partnering with companies who will provide technology so that they're able to do their job better. And in the case of the co-op, providing them the guidance that they need to get their license to become a part of the legal market. And one of the things that we do forget is that in different industries, people speak different languages. And so GrowTech is really about enabling success for government, the legalized industry, and the pre-legalized industry. And the companies we will look at are going to address specific needs, whether it's payment processing, tech around the growing aspects, challenges with packaging. Sustainability is a big issue. People are very upset about the amount of packaging that exists for the product being shipped. So we are open to working with companies who will address any one of those pain points.
That's great. Thank you so much. Vahid, question for you. When you're working with companies in the Victory Square portfolio, part of your responsibility is to ensure that they're getting product market fit. And before they go into sourcing secondary financing, before they pursue that scaling component, what's the criteria you go through to ensure that they're ready to A, make sure that they've got the right traction, B, can handle the growth that's coming on both the business development and support, and ultimately to ensure that they're ready to, when they get a larger infusion of capital, to use it effectively?
So the first thing is like Victory Square, as part of the investment committee, before we invest in any companies, the very first step that we take is we make sure that there is a pain in the market for the businesses that we're going to go after. Now we have some major partners around the world, from the major consulting companies to businesses such as Foxwood Casino. In different areas, we try to find the market pain. When we find the market pain, we reach out to 80+ accelerator partner that we have around the world to find the business that there is a need for it out there. So we kind of securing their first major customers before we start investing in any companies. However, with saying that, when you go through the development of any product or a service, you may face with the problem that things will change, the trend will change. The biggest thing that we do is, instead of putting everything from our perspective, we try to look at it from the potential customer's perspective, from the people that in the very first place found that pain in the market. The biggest difference that I see in the marketing and sales in today's world is not about the product that you're offering. It's about the experience that you are creating for your end users. And in order for you to find the best experience for your end user, you need to figure out what is that missing experience that they have. There are many companies who's doing this right. When, the example that I always use, if you ask question from people, if you have heard of Volvo and what is you known it for, the very first thing they say, safety. But if you ask them, can you name 5 of their cars, you barely know, any of the name of the cars, because you are feeling that experience. So same thing with all the portfolio company. We try to find that experience that is missing in the market, and we try to fit the product for them based on the market capacity that we can see it in the market. Sometimes the same product can be offered to the same group of people with different messaging and different packages that we go through that. As long as every step of the way is measurable, we will be able to always pivot, or if need to be, we add more funding to it, or we need to add more resources to it to make sure they're going to go through the path and they have that final offering to the right audiences.
Thank you. That's actually solid. Really appreciate that. Sohail, for you, similar question to as I gave Ted. Can you tell us more about the intellectual property, the kind of core strength of this business, why you founded it, and why it's going to be successful because of this application of your thesis?
Okay, so from a macro perspective, in the industry right now, we have a large demand coming for phytocannabinoids in general. And with many products, particular products, and also a lot of existing products from big CPG companies, food companies, pharma industry that will be infused with phytocannabinoids. So this leads to the challenge of really having a proper supply chain that's able to feed it. So for us at AgTech, this starts with basically identifying or developing the genetics that gives you the optimal high yield plants. From there on, then you have to work on everything that's tissue culture and propagation, so you have millions and millions of optimal healthy plants, again, to go through the grow part. The actual agriculture is obviously a key component as well. So whether it's the hundreds and thousands of acres of outdoor farm land that we put to use for growing hemp, or nearly 5 million square feet of greenhouse for a more controlled grow environment. We have about 2 million square feet in the state of Kentucky, which is one of the epicenters of the hemp movement right now in the US. And now if you've been able to harvest millions of pounds of biomass, the next critical component is high volume industrial scale extraction. And now I'm not talking about the off-the-shelf, 100-liter machine that is offered to the industry, but we're talking about, again, more customized, automated lines that are able to handle much higher volume. To put that in perspective, for us, 50,000 square feet facility that we have near Lexington, its output capability is around 14,000 pounds per day. So I think that translates to something like just over about 2,000 metric tons of biomass processed every year. And in order to do that, you need to have the right expertise so that you can run closed loop and save every ounce of solvent and so on. And now that gives you basically the raw material from which we can make products. Now, whether it's for us to be able to supply a big manufacturer that's looking to have a partner that has that vertically integrated supply chain, or moving on to installing what's high volume lines for making tinctures and gel caps and so on, so that we can, again, enable brands by manufacturing large scale on their behalf. Okay. So this is the vertically integrated chain that we need to control from what we call now root to their seed to sale. Most people are familiar with that. We like to use now the root to shelf.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. You know, I just want to be really clear on this. So 2019 is turning out to be a very different animal than 2018. And as companies that are moving forward, you have to be able to embrace that. So candidly, and I think the audience here definitely want to know this, you know, with 2019 here coming, can you give us a minute and a half, and just tell us, for each of your respective ventures, you know, what are you most excited about? How are you going to tackle 2019? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Ted, perhaps you could start.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing about what I do and the esports industry in general is that every year there's some surprise that comes out of nowhere. So again, I think it depends on how much you guys follow gaming, but if you guys have kids, you probably heard of Fortnite. So Fortnite completely blew up in 2018. And so this is the question that I always want to ask myself, actually, is what defines esports? I think the panelists in the previous talks have their own definitions in mind, but for me, you know, it's Fortnite and esports. They have competitions, tournaments, they have celebrities that stream, that compete, but is it an esports? So, you know, for our approach at Peak, we always look at gaming first, and then we try to define, okay, so what is it that makes competitive? You know, we don't try to force a definition of esports. So in a sense, you know, we want to follow the market. We want to see in 2019, is there going to be another game that pops up? The Fortnite, now that, you know, it's worth billions of dollars, what are you going to do with that money? How's the competition going to be? And I want to be part of that ecosystem, provide a solution so that we can support the game, we can support the people that support the game. And with the technologies and platforms that are part of that ecosystem, such as Twitch, such as Discord, you know, what can we do to work with them so that we can further enable this the growth of esports, and it's inevitable that young people are going to get more and more involved and engaged with esports, with games. So I think, you know, what excites me is actually the unknown. You know, I think there are things that we can predict. There are things in which, you know, being in an investor conference, we know where the money will possibly flow. But there's always going to be new things popping up, and we just want to follow the trends.
Ted, thanks very much for that. Sohail, just a minute, 1 minute on. 1 minute. Same question now.
Sure. So for us, what's exciting is the change in regulations, because now the marketplace is opening for our products. What gets us going in the morning or losing sleep at night is how to say yes to all of these sales opportunities coming our way and have the supply for it. And just to give you a perspective, our minimum output for this year is estimated at 12 times what we have produced last year. So this puts a lot of operational and organizational challenge, of course, in order to be able to do that. This is an exciting time as well, because anything that involves multiplying by 10 or 20 times your business is certainly an exciting period and a challenging one to navigate to.
Those are fantastic problems to have. Thank you. Vahid, from yourself?
What excites me the most is usually for the entire process for Victory Square to find the market gap, find the solution, incubate them, finance them, working with them closely, and then take them to liquidation. It's usually a 24 to 30 months process for us for any business before we take them to liquidation, and our shareholder can benefit from that. What excites me the most is 9 of our 23 portfolio companies in the final stages from the accelerator up, that we are seeing the big growth on the revenue side. The EBITDA is positive, and we can see that trend is happening in last 2 quarters. So what excites me the most is in next 3 to 4 quarters, the 9 selected companies that we have that are further in the process, they're gonna go through liquidation, and you know, we're gonna see you know, some amazing results happens for Victory Square, our portfolio companies, as well as our shareholders.
It's great, man. Thank you so much. Brinder, certainly not least, certainly not last, please.
2019 is going to be a big year for GrowTech Labs as we are searching out talent and being very inspired by the solutions that are out there. But from a regulatory perspective, it's the year of the edible regulations is also. And the edible market is fundamentally going to shift how consumers are purchasing products for wellness. And I think 2019 is also going to be a big conversation on should CBD actually still be considered a substance like THC. And I think that we want to be a part of that conversation because what we see having the most impact on this industry in terms of serving medicinal patients and recreational users or those who use cannabis for preventative wellness is the fact that we have to keep the conversation alive about what is CBD and how should that be actually viewed by regulators. So we've got some pretty big tasks at hand, and we're really grateful for the partnerships and very supportive that we're building a team. So please reach out.
And on that note, I'll keep it really succinct at this point. Victory Square has been here. We're supported throughout Cantech. We're really happy to be part of the community. We have a fairly extensive lounge right behind you. We encourage you to come by, talk to the Victory Square team. Our CEO will be here. I'm here. Vahid is here. And more importantly, our portfolio companies are here directly. So if you'd like to learn more about them, learn how you can get involved, learn where they're going, why they're going to go there, why they're going to be successful, why we curated these companies so thoroughly, and why they're so well positioned to go forward, come talk to us, have a conversation, and thank you for making the time to host us and see us today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.